as a mindfulness practice. And so as Muslims, we're called to go through our life exhibiting this taqwa, to protect ourselves from falling into ghafla, from heedlessness. And so awareness is, and that idea of becoming awakened, I think is also one that we could really, from the Arabic vocabulary, relate to really richly. Of course, from Buddhism as well, we have the core teachings of the Buddha about the Four Noble Truths that relate to suffering and the causes of suffering and the alleviation of suffering. And the Quran talks a lot about human suffering and the reasons for human suffering and the ways to alleviate human suffering. So I'll maybe have 2 more minutes here and just show you a few more that I think are rich avenues for dialogue. This is another of the many Quranic verses that have to do with testing. And here we have the concept, for those of you who are in the field of medicine, perhaps, this idea of appealing to our senses. Like we get sick, we know we get heart disease. Okay, that's a condition in the material world. But there's a metaphysical condition called heart disease, and we all have it to some extent. And so what are we doing to proactively treat ourselves? The Noble Eightfold Path, I think, resonates with Muslims so beautifully. Like, what if the Eightfold Path doesn't remind you of a core practice or virtue of Islam? Like, we could say right aqidah, right belief, right resolve. That could be something like sabr, or there's many ways to think about this. Right speech. The Quran has so many passages about the sadaq, the person of right speech. So there's a lot to be in dialogue about and to learn from one another. This connection really fascinates me, and I talk about this a lot in the Islamic monotheism book, between right action, right understanding, and then the ability to have wisdom. Right? So what is the understanding hikmah, for instance, in the Islamic tradition, to be able to put the things in their proper place. And that's wisdom. Because wisdom could look different from one situation to the other. It'll change, right? So how do we have the ability to discern what is right and what is wrong when the situations are so very different all the time? We're being presented with new situations. So as not to disappoint the Unitarian Universalists in the room, I wanted to draw on the really rich principles of Unitarian Universalism, starting with the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which is also something that's mirrored almost one for one in the Islamic tradition. Justice, equality, compassion, all very core virtues. So I won't go through them all, but I just wanted to say this is fantastic. Even taking these principles and saying, what in the Islamic tradition, what Quranic verses do these principles pair with one-to-one? And these principles are right off the UU website, so they're very, very accessible. And then the sources, Unitarianism has, as it's moved and evolved and developed, articulated this sort of living tradition where all of these sources of wisdom are coming, these different sources of wisdom. And I think we can, while in the Islamic tradition we recognize that Allah is al-Hakim, the most wise, and the Alim, the knower of all things, that simultaneously we also have sources of wisdom, the Quran, the prophetic hadith, the people who are near to Allah in our tradition, the natural world. So we too have all of these different sources, the direct experience of Allah in some cases. So I'll stop it there, and as is customary to end in a presentation, an Islamic presentation, we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ahli Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ahli Ibrahim. So may Allah send peace and blessings on the Prophet Muhammad and on the family of Ibrahim and of all of the righteous sages throughout history. And as a supplication, may we be people of virtue, may we be people who ta'aruf, to take the time to get to know one another. May we be people who respect inherent human dignity, and may we be people of curiosity too, right? Because in order to get to know one another, we can't just stay in our silos, we have to go out of our silos. So special thank you to those of you who have come maybe for your first time to the Lawrence Islamic Center. And as is also customary, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for any of my shortcomings, and may we all, those of us who are fasting, have our fast accepted. And I will not go on anymore because I know we have to get on to the very, very important business of eating, inshallah. So, jazakumullah khairan. I did put my email up. I do welcome people to reach out. Give me about a month to respond. If I don't respond after a month, feel free to send it again. Sometimes I'm faster than that, but may the blessings of the universe be upon you, and alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, and we will open the floor for any questions you might have.
Got some questions now and some later.
So someone who has worked on civilization, so what do you think of the Netanyahu hypothesis?
I don't know that I know it, but I don't know that I want to know it either.
It's not the Benjamin Netanyahu, no, it's a different one.
Oh, okay.
Anti-Semitism starting in Western Europe, because the Jews were seen as the allies of Muslims. So I thought maybe you may have come across it.
What I've come across in my research, and the story is told by Unity Film Productions. They do a lovely job of their films. They have a film looking at some of the ways in which Muslims were able to secure safe passage for Jews. And I'm very conscious that I'm talking about this in a city that has a history of the Underground Railroad being here, so I think it's particularly poignant to mention that. And because it was easy for Jews, especially Sephardic Jews, to pass as Muslim, you have many instances where mosques would shelter families, and so I do know that history, and I point out Unity Film Productions because they've done a lovely film. I can't think exactly what it's called if anybody knows it off the top of their mind, but they have their films on their website.
Thank you.
Could you elaborate on the grace of Guru that was in the recitation?
From Sikhism. Okay, so Sikhism has, similarly to how Muslims have prophets, or the Hebrew Bible tradition has prophets, Sikhism has gurus, and the gurus are human teachers, essentially. And we have 10 Sikh gurus, and then the final guru becomes the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the sacred scripture of Sikhism. And so it's amazing, in a gurdwara, in a Sikh temple, the book, the sacred book is personified in a way as if, because it's a living source of knowledge. It is, the human being is no longer present, but the book becomes the living source. So that might have been in the Mool Mantra, that might be the reference to the Guru being the Guru Granth Sahib. Let's see. Yeah, so God, he can be realized through the grace of the Guru. So that might be a reference, I would have to check, that might be a reference to the Holy Book, or that might be a reference to the entire line of teaching. The Guru Granth Sahib, by the way, for Muslims, it has Arabic writings in it that come from, some of them from Muslim figures in the Guru Granth Sahib. So that's a great point of kind of conversation with our Sikh brothers and sisters.
Thank you.
Controversial question, so gender studies and all. Looking back, if we look at Arabic Islamic civilization, the issue of LGBTQ, so the history, what does that show? Tolerance or homophobia?
Yes, I think those categories are much too simple, and I think I could probably give an entire talk, but I could probably share some resources that would do it more justice than I can in the 2 minutes before we're about to break. But I'll tell you some personal stories that I think might resonate. When I came into Islam in my 20s, and when I was first studying Arabic at the Islamic University of Cairo, I had a chance to experience sort of just typical Egyptian kind of culture. And I was very struck by the level of physical intimacy between people. And coming from, different cultures have different ways of being in the physical body and having it be in proximity to others. And so I think that sometimes when we come into Western context, people can experience a real deficiency of like physical intimacy, and I don't mean intimacy in a sexual sense. I mean like that, being held or being, and even by. I say this story to say that I thought when I was in the university AEC, that when I was there, I thought like most of the guys were gay men, and it turns out that no, they were just very affectionate with each other. It's a complicated question when you take it across cultures, across time periods. I'll leave it at that for now. But there's good work being done to try to understand this history, and then what do we do at present, which is a live, very much an open kind of issue. Especially I work on college campuses, right? So that's a very live issue for a lot of the youth.
So my question is very friendly. How do you feel the first couple of days in Ramadan without your family?
So when I said yes to the lectures, oh my goodness, and then I realized it was Ramadan because we just kind of put it on the calendar. Ramadan sort of sneaks up every year. So I wasn't thinking March, Ramadan, right? So I had some smooth talking to have to do with my family. But the beautiful thing is that there's, we can break fast together. So I've said, we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the grand planner, so perhaps it was that I would need to be here during Ramadan, inshallah, to be able to break fast with all of you. And that might actually be a nice transition, actually. So just that question, and I'll be back, I think, to be able to answer more.
We'll continue the discussion over dinner.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Here you are from